Western upbringing, as he was encouraged by his mother from a very early age to pursue spiritual understanding above all things and as a means of true education. Blending this spiritual knowledge with a custom curriculum, he was homeschooled through much of his primary and secondary educational phases. And he was known as James also, has become increasingly fascinated by the notions of other life forms with vast knowledge in the existence of life after physical death, and pursued those subjects to their origins. He notes reading many rare works such as the Pseudepigrapha, Apocrypha. I'm not sure, I can't pronounce these appropriately. While most children his age were reading The Cat in the Hat. He encountered many interactions of a paranormal nature throughout his childhood, and when reaching adulthood and utilizing this knowledge and experience, he began to develop a collective body of wisdom now embedded in all of his works that are ever-changing and evolving. Currently, he's in his mid-30s, and he resides in Costa Rica and is dedicated to the full-time development of sacred energy, a fusing of all his knowledge and experience designed with an advanced framework around the core principles of communication and connection, a social network functioning as a nexus and backbone to unite seekers worldwide. I'm very humbled and honored to present to you who I call Night Star, Sevan Bomar. Sevan, welcome to the call.
It's great to be on the call, Lisa. It's just an amazing day as we're, like I said, coming into this lineup, and a lot of the stuff is even becoming more clear. You know, if that's possible, I think every time I do a show, I always listen to that show, and I was like, man, you know, how can we beat that transmission? And then, you know, there comes another one. So this may be the day. I mean, knock on wood, this may be the day I totally disintegrate in front of everyone's eyes, but I don't anticipate so. It looks like that we're lined up for yet another amazing astral quest, as we call it, through our consciousness and discovering what this is all about and what's going on. So obviously, I'm super excited to be on the show, and it's a pleasure.
Heaven, yeah. I know in our brief conversation beforehand, I shared that I personally have had experiences with Kundalini and things like that, and my own activation. So I'm really thrilled to have you, and I just love your work. I don't ever seeing you implode anymore. If we do, it's only to be reborn in a more exponentially beautiful fractal. So.
Yeah. Well, today's show, and it's funny that you mentioned it that way, because I just was able to overcome something just as of yesterday, because the other side has really been beating on my door, meaning that just the ability to get into the spaces that are unknown has been it's been happening a lot. I'll just say it that way. And sometimes in certain energetic fields, I feel like, man, if I go too far, I may not make it back. And this is a big part of the fear that goes on with even getting out of the body and beyond. And today I finally realized, based on what we're all talking about being into totality and becoming collected, et cetera, that we know this world is in a sense a shadow of what we really are and what is beyond. And it allowed me to see really that if there's something that is true and real here, something that is true and real to you, something you say that you love or you care about and that you're afraid of leaving, you can really, really understand that on the other side, there would only be a more graduated, more perfected version of that. And that's quite a bit to think about, because, we're all afraid of leaving the loved ones and all this stuff, and we don't really understand exactly the real components to this reality. Everyone is just, instructing. One person's instructing based on what they were instructed, based on what they were instructed. And it's gotten quite out of control, because much of everything that we've been taught is not true at all. But there's also this part of us that is in fear of loss, and that's even where the fear of death comes in at, is it's a fear of losing everything and the fear of leaving everyone. And what today is going to prove beyond the shadow of doubt, literally, is that there is nothing to be lost. In fact, it would be, if you could make it beyond into the real true self, the oversoul, everything that you ever cherished would be there, but it would also be in its magnitude, in its perfected state. So it gives you more incentive to conquer those fears. And so I know different people are on different parts of the path, but we all face that point when possibly ejecting from Earth, that we cling to it, and this kind of prevents us from going as far as we could go.
Yes, I I have had many personal experiences with what you just said so eloquently. Um, the one piece of wisdom that I've gleaned from it is that when you lose everything, there's nothing more to fear. So you just pick yourself up and continue on, and then that's when the magic really starts. And uh, you have, I love the term Innerstanding. A friend of mine introduced that to me, and I just had to go with that because I love the word gnosis, which, as you well know, is simply the knowledge that we have within in our higher self that has nothing to do with what our left brain intook or was programmed or any of that. And Innerstanding is just really so much more appropriate on so many levels, not only because of the double speak with language and how it's used in the various legal fraud and things like that, and the misinformation that's put out, but that it's the opposite of understanding. It's understanding, and it brings connection, and it's about how we all come together. So, but I didn't have the show to talk for me today. I want to hear all about you. So why don't you step in? This is a new show. We have a really great crowd that's on, and they're all ready to sit here and partake of your spiritual wisdom and experience. So why don't you give us a head start here and go wherever your soul and source says is the best place to go right now.
Okay, well let's do it then, because that's just the cue that I'm looking for. I'm lighting stage one of the centrifuges. So first thing I want to say is, it's been an amazing adventure. To those who've just got on, just become awake in a certain tense, welcome aboard. And for those who feel like they've been awake forever to the point where they've fallen back asleep, well, it's time to wake up again. And this is an amazing lineup. Like, I even saw some stuff the other day, and it's kind of a prelude to the conversation, but most of the reality now speaks to me. Like, when you line up, the synchronicities get so wild that if you just understand what you're looking at, then you're able to read the framework, because all of this is really being scripted and structured in an orderly fashion, if you but knew, as we always say, if you just had the eyes to be able to see it. So it comes out that we do have the eyes to actually see it now, and so a lot of things are unfolding step by step. And it's even been quite amazing for me, and I've had quite a bit of spiritual experiences in my life, but some of the stuff that I'm seeing lately is going way over the meter, the little Ghostbusters meter that they carry around. That thing is going nuts. And what I would say is that there's a harmonic frequency with those who are ready to pierce into truth, and it exists all the way down to the ants' kingdom, baby. And even there's some ants down there that are revolting. And later on in the conversation, that'll become a lot more. That'll become a lot more understood, and it'll also be a lot more funnier. But the reality is that the lineup that we're about to go through, I think within 2 days, is the lineup of the sun, the lineup of the moon, and the lineup of Earth, right? And these are not necessarily rare lineups, but this is known as a supermoon. So since there's all of these different energies going into super phase, I just feel like that is probably my time to go ahead and go into that super phase again too. I'm just going to take the cue. So I want to first say that this is going to be a very dynamic message, and it's just that most people are working with synchronicity now, so there'll be a lot of questions answered for people who are just looking to get the answer to those questions and asking those questions. But some of this stuff, you would really need to go back to some of the things that we've posted on astroquest.com, astroquest.tv, and mainly the podcast, trying to go back to the first recordings to see how we've come to these notions, because some of the stuff will be quite clear, and then other things you'll have to get a little bit more data on. But I just want to say that I'm not here to mislead you and lead you astray and take your money and any of this kind of weird things, and it's just because I got far more better things to do. And if I was into something like that, I don't even think I could have gotten this far with this kind of information. And also application. So what's most important for me, though, is the progress of our true selves and coming into totality, and I'll let nothing get in my way to be able to accomplish that. And so I believe that when one thinks negatively, it's kind of logic that they're pulling themselves in the wrong direction. If you're scheming and those kind of things, it's kind of logical that you wouldn't come into some major arcana that would be useful. So just understand that my sharing of what I'm experiencing on the path is just that. I'm in this in real time, and I'm seeing things, and I'm just able to translate that as a bridge back to humanity to say, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out what happens after we die, and I'm going to keep a log on this. And that's what the last 6 years has really been of this consistent message that we've been broadcasting, while I have had a quite enigmatic life in spirituality when I was younger all the way up until now. So I just want to explain to everyone that in a dualistic plane, which is what Earth is, it functions on the opposite poles, and that's how it generates energy. You will always get specific things. And for our epoch that we're actually in, it's easier to understand these forces as fire and water. Because between these two elements, which are the elements of this epoch that currently come into conflict with one another to generate this reality that we're looking at, we will call those forces either Jehovian, which are lunar water-based entities, or Luciferian, which have a tendency to be solar, Venusian, or any other light plane kind of frequencies. And between these two states of consciousness, which could be seen also as black and white, there's a constant volley back and forth of millions, literally myriads of different decisions and actions and shapes and colors and all sorts of stuff, and that produces what we call the matrix. Now, there's an organic matrix in that tense, meaning that just what you see with stardust, what you see with minerals, what you see with kale, what you see with cucumbers and carrots and even human bodies, that there is an organic nature to how universes can be created. But we have to also see ourselves now in what's more referred to as somewhat of a simulation, which is basically when people begin to come off of the same organic substances that they were raised with, and then are subject to what would be called, oh my goodness, I'm looking for the word here. But it basically means when whatever you're interacting with begins to blend with you. And so if we're in a sense using computers and we're using different forms of technology, we're speaking certain languages, then that is actually blending with us, and then it's creating something. And so the easiest way to see this is actually as a genetically modified organism. And it's time to stop seeing GMO as just what happens to fruits and what happens to people when they eat those fruits. But more or less, if you look at what a seed is, and if something could be genetically modified to not have a seed would be a soul. So what if a human can be genetically modified to have less soul? There's no seeds inside. It's easy to juice a person that doesn't have any seeds. So just like it's easy to juice a fruit that doesn't have any seeds. So the reality is that there's this connection with every single thing that we're experiencing. Nothing is left out. That if we can see deeper and sometimes more simpler, we can pull out the hidden mysteries to exactly what's going on in this reality. Stop getting played with our energy and our current. Stop having our current turned around and then sold back to us again. And I really want to take a moment to explain that. See, people don't need money. Think about what I'm saying. Like they say all the time, oh man, if these Illuminati really wanted to help everyone in the world, they have enough money to help everyone. And they forget that people don't need money. They need the resources. And these people that they're calling Illuminati or whatever that have tons of resources, tons of money, it's not the money that they have. It's the resources. It's the mines that they have, the gold and the diamond mines, because they can take these elements and turn that around and make it into a cell phone. And then sell the cell phone right back to the country that had the mine that they took over. Like think about just Indonesia alone. Indonesia produces most of the elements that are within a cell phone, and it's actually destroying their country, okay? But then that mine is probably, in most cases, owned by British territory. So they go in, they take the mine, then they build the phone, and then they sell the phone back to the people, but it's only a fraction of the resources that they're giving up. So I just want it to be very clear for people to understand that people don't need money. What they need is the resources. And then what they also need to do is they need to understand exactly what the use of these resources is, because honestly, substances such as titanium, gold, iridium, and these kind of elements that put together these silly machines that we have do wonders for the body when creating the right type of objects and different things that actually meld directly with our energetic system, because we are everything. But if that's the case, if someone makes a version of everything that is less pure, that is fake, and that we choose to wear. It's like wearing fake gold. You just turn your neck all green and it doesn't have the real resonance. You're not going to be able to build any high capacity device with that kind of gold because it's not a real conductor. So what we have to do is what we get to do is stop taking these artificial and counterfeit versions of who we are and what we're really about and reach for the heights. Keep it wide open until you figure out more of what's going on, because they say that you have choice, but how much choice do you have if you don't know all the options? If you bring me 3 pairs of shoes and say choose, well, you haven't really given me a choice. You've only given me 3 options. That's what those are called. So when we talk about choice, we need to step back for a moment, get a little non-biased. It doesn't mean that the conversation won't be dualistic in certain ways. After all, we're on a physical plane. But being non-biased is taking it all the way to check back all the way to who exactly is involved and what exactly is going on before you already shut the book and then sign off somebody who may be wearing that symbol. So here we are, and we're at the point of the simulation. And the reason is because we have to understand that there's only 2 fields here. There's totality, and then there's physical planes. That's as simple as it gets. The whole thing narrows down to that, because in totality, well, that's everything. Good luck surviving in there. Good luck surviving as whoever you think you are, because after all, everything is either everything or nothing, nothing in between. The in-between are these planes. So I found it quite useful to get out of the whole, I'm ready to ascend out of the physical planes and be done with the whole thing with the physical bodies and all this kind of stuff. And actually going more into, well, let me at least take the lesson. How would one shape, form, and fashion a perfect dimension? Because I may want just one of those, like somebody may just want a car. I may want a perfect dimension that I create and put in balance as a trophy of my graduation from the university on Earth, and then keep going with this. See, it's all the time that we're always trying to give up something, like giving up the memories and giving up the egos and giving up all this kind of stuff. But realistically, it all just needs to be packed, put in its place, and us to go beyond, because we can contain this experience. So there's nothing to really give up and there's nothing to really lose here. And so the reality of our existence now, because of this genetic modification. Now, the reason why, let's make genetic modification very simple here. On certain humans, you still see that slightly above below the bone in the spine, the coccyx, that there is actually an indenture there that looks like they should have a tail. And this is something that you can still see today. There's still thousands of people that have an indenture right on the top of, or right below the coccyx of the spine, to where it seems like there should be another appendage. And we know that, of course, in other countries, some people are actually born every now and then with that appendage, with a tail. And so this is showing the evidence, because I don't want to get into much of what that tail really means and when it was cut off and all this kind of thing and what that would equal. I just want to get into the simple idea right away that there has been some modifying going on with the human body. And this modification can take place over just a couple generations, even one generation, depending upon what kind of tools are being used to genetically modify that individual. But once those modifications take place, what we really get to is an organism that is actually off balance. Now, this is interesting, because if you notice what the tail really does, it actually keeps the animal balanced. And the knowledge goes that the other vertebrae in the tail were actually the previous existence. This is that they say in the ancient traditions that each position on the spine is a symbol of the soul's triumph over flesh. Basically a challenge that took place. And then when you understand that challenge, it's just like facing fire. You know what to do and what not to do next time. But if for some reason your tail is removed, then you would lose balance. Meaning if your story, your tail, your family legend, whatever, if it's removed, it's easy to lose balance in the reality. And so how this manifests is it manifests with us primarily using one side of the body. And on the world, according to census, most people use the right side of their body, right? They're right-handed, And so this equals the left side of the brain. So what happened is that when they started doing deep research, these scientists, They realized what they came out with is that the left side of the brain, which most people are functioning on, is actually retarded. But then,
I agree.
but then check this out. They did the next thing, proving that they were still operating on that side when they were doing all their research. They ignored it. Instead of compensating for what is going on in the left hemisphere of the brain, they just went on with just clearing the paper and publishing it and just doing the left brain logical retarded side of things, which is not even to alert people that, hey, this is what's going on. In the right side of your brain, which you're mostly using when you're asleep, you have this ability, and this is why during sleep deprivation, the left side of the brain, and being completely out of balance in itself most of the time, burns up energy. And this is actually what makes you sleepy. It's the left brain logical side of the brain that gets sleepy. And when this part of the brain gets sleepy, that's the only time that the right brain can actually even come out to play. And this becomes very interesting because, see, the left brain is like the dominant masculine, while the right brain is like the passive feminine. And unless the person allows that side of the brain to once again come in, not even come in balance, because the left brain has now learned things through its logic that makes it even more horrible to deal with. It's not actually functional in the spiritual plane. Meaning that the moment that a person tries to tap into their left brain side, you can't get out of the body. You can't perceive higher states of consciousness. The only thing that comes in really is fear. And then the lies, and then the jealousy, and then the envy, because those are all tied into one specific side of the brain that needs help. Now, this is another thing, because now I'm talking about just the brain, but you would also see these manifestations in a hologram like this. You would see it in other areas in life where there would be a side that is exercising the dominance over everything, like it knows what it's doing. This is government and the rest of the people throwing the bombs around, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, the visionaries, the one tapped into the right side of the brain, seemed to understand how this would be perfect, how it could be sustainable, but not allowed to say anything. See, so what happens is, I'm honing in on more to understand these two sides of the brain because it's very important, and it's very important to expansion. So what happens with this right side is when you go to sleep, when the left brain, it goes to sleep, now it's able to activate. And now it's able to show you and begin to project to you what spiritual phenomena is about, which is like what you're doing in the dream, flying around, different people, recalling things you thought you forgot, all sorts of stuff. But then when the right brain, when the left brain starts to wake up again, now is ready to come back into the reality and ready to experience reality, and then the dream is forgotten. But here's another thing. The right brain is still awake. The right brain does not go to sleep. It's back there and just waiting for the left brain to give it some leeway into doing something again. And the reason why I'm bringing this up early in this conversation is I just want you to understand that there is a side of you that doesn't sleep. There is really no such thing even as two sides unless we create them, because there will be one side. That's where everything comes from. And then there will be its reflection. And so, go ahead.
No, sorry, I just want to ask you a question because that makes so much perfect sense with Kundalini. I mean, you don't need to sleep. I call it being drunk on goddess. And I could not use my left brain to explain anything to anyone or anything. And it's like you just don't have access to it. It seems so moot, the left brain, when you're under Kundalini. So
for sure. I mean, it's virtually inundated. It's basically out of territory. It can't even begin to comprehend what goes on in those kind of energetic fields. And this is why also that, see, in occultism, the tail, not to get back to that, but it's an important thing, was known as being the appendage of Satan. They said that when a person actually sent the Kundalini down, what they begin to develop was a tail. And this is so interesting because, see, what's happening here is that if one side of the brain is functioning, that means that we're only seeing one side of everything. And we're scared to death of unlocking the other side of what has been going on to why we're in these matrices, not knowing what's going on. What has made an otherwise an array, a disarray. And what is taking us from the level of being such grand beings, not into this whole conflicting ourselves and not into this whole telling ourselves that we're bad and we've done wrong, but into the glory of what we can do when we're not even thinking and we're just creating. When we're solving the problems, not talking about what the problems actually are. But it's interesting though, because this is not a show to blame anyone. But if you really want to know what's really going on, the simulation in itself is projected by a specific group or frequency of consciousness that overrides, like one who has extreme domination over their mind, what we call mind control. It can override the rest of the body or the rest of the hive that's in the corpus. So, because what we're looking at is, they say, what is the universe? The universe is a large body. And this is where in Kabbalah it becomes Adam Kadmon. They think that's just walking man on the universe. No, that is the whole universe. And it's actually not a man. It's Adam Kadmon is a man-woman. Same thing what they call the body of Christ. Okay, what is this? This is another body that makes up millions of people, basically, all together on one frequency and one band on different levels. Some are making up the feet, some are making up the head. But that's that body. And then same thing with, they say, the body of Osiris, that they split into 14 pieces. The 14 pieces are the different regions, the different territories, but it's all one body. And so what we need to see now is who's in the head now. Like who's in the head of this collective projection that we are sharing together. Or more directly, who is in your head? That means that the person that's listening should ask themselves, who's talking in your head? Because last time we checked, it's literally Oz behind the curtain pushing the intercom button sometime and saying, hey, don't trust that person. That person is not for us. Remember last time. And then the person takes it as their own thoughts. See, what I'm saying to people now is the left brain was compromised. It was hacked. So the same frequency or wavelength that these people use to do their MK Ultras and their mind controls and programming, they come through that left brain. Because the right brain then becomes subject to the left brain and then starts to programming itself. See, I didn't tell everyone that the right brain was the good one. What I said was that the right brain is capable of getting you in a vehicle that takes you into a higher light, a higher spectrum, where the effects of the causes that go on here, the causes to the effects that go on here are really encased. But what happens is the left brain gets beat all up by that side if the right brain gets beat up by the left brain and gets taught that the dogmatic tradition, this is religious right programming in the firmware. If they get taught the good and bad and the good and evil, if it gets taught that so much, then it begins to teach the right brain that. See, the right brain is what we're shaping. And this is why the greatest master said, see, what we have is we have a seed of a soul, but it's not yet cultivated. So don't get it confused here. It's still your responsibility to take this seed of this soul and to cultivate it, what they said, to fabricate it, meaning that you actually have to make it. And so this is a totally different way that we look at things, but think about it. Our spirituality is grown from a child all the way to an adult based on what we're teaching it now. So it's still, though, not just knowing everything all on its own. And it does have a lot of different abilities, but knowing is something that's just subject to this reality is what I'm saying. Like, because when you go to sleep, you'll notice yourself doing things in the dream, flipping all around and doing stuff that you would have never thought that you could do in the physical reality, right?
Yeah.
So this is what it's about. It's about really breaking down this side of this wall that is going on between the right brain and the left brain, that the left brain, and remember, the left brain is exercising dominance, so it's now time to compensate. They say the agencies that you're looking at really all boil into the CIA, even the cult groups, they all boil into that because they're the ones with the technology. They're the ones with a whole nother scope of level of control over this entire globe. So from that point on, you have to realize that everyone is subject to some kind of hacking unless they compensate. And let's talk about what compensation is or what that's about. Now, if my leg is bad, but I got to go out and play in a sport, I'm going to favor my other leg. I'm going to put most of the weight on my other leg because I know that this left is bad. I'm not going to go out there like I don't have a problem with my leg. So this is the same thing that we have to do with the left brain logical side, is always remember in our actions automatically that, hey, you got to balance out that left side and that thought that you just had, because it's going to be hacked. It's not, it can be, it's going to be. And this is a big part of the deprogramming, right? And now where you can connect to, though, because remember, I don't introduce problems because solutions exist before problems. Surely the sun existed before the shadows. And that's why the word solution, soul, is in it, because it shows you, oh, I'm first. Solutions are first. Problems come later. So what happens is that if you happen to have a problem, or if you hear problems introduced today, trust me, you're going to hit solutions right behind it. See, there's a part of the body, I'm naming it the revelator. And when I'm talking about the body, I'm not just talking about the one that you're in. I'm talking about the universal body. In the universal body, there's a revelator, meaning that there's an actual portion of you that when getting trapped in a hive, because the same thing that becomes your glorious experience in this reality can also be your coffin if you don't know how to get out. And that's the secret to the pentagram. They say the pentagram is the symbol of man's mastery over the elements, unless it's turned upside down. And when I say man and woman, when I say man, I also mean woman, just to explain everyone in the conversation, because man just means flesh, those who are made out of flesh. So what we have is we have this other level of power and ability in a specific frequency that is tied into breaking out of the hive. I always visualize this now as this ant that's like, man, this is just ridiculous. Every single day, there's food in my mouth, and then bring it back to the queen. And the queen makes more babies so that she can go ahead and make them put food in their mouth and bring it back to her. And then there's only a couple other guys, and they seem to be able to have sex with the queen, and then she kills them. This just really sucks, because I think there's a trash can across the street next to that candy store. And it's like, I just don't understand why I should keep being a part of this. And then there's others too. There's others that say, hey man, did you eat that candy that we just picked up? We're supposed to give the queen. It's like, I'm sure she's not going to notice. It sounds funny, but what I'm saying is it's in a hive, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. That's why the pentagram is so powerful over different things, because it actually is a symbol of how the word becomes flesh. And this is, again, in the cultism. That's why you see these people with pentagrams all over the flag, pentagram on the neck, pentagram tattooed on the face, pentagram tattooed on the booty, pentagrams everywhere. Why? Because there is a hidden world that knows how to mark with symbols. But their most useful tool, and this means you also, is the language. See, you have to go back to the Old Testament when the confusion started. There's an actual point in there where it says confusion will begin. Because the entity that is running the show back then, aka the Lord, the King of Kings, said, man, you know what? If they keep building this tower, this means the Jed, this means your Kundalini, this means your chakra center. Then pretty soon, there will be nothing they won't be capable of doing. Let us go down and confuse them. So this meant that they're obviously now just speaking in plural. So there's more than one being that's saying, hey, let's go down and confuse them. What was the tool used? Language. Then there was a confusion of language and tongues. And see, this didn't just happen for the humans. Most people who don't have the original of these books, which really stem into the Upanishads and steer into other books, what it says specifically when reenacting this specific story about the confusion of the tongues is that actually the entities that were living on the planet then could communicate with everything, not just each other. They knew the language of the trees. They knew the language of the animals. They knew the language of everything around them. So there was no confusion. See, there was only harmony. Harmony is in communication. Try to go to a country and you can't speak the language. It's hard to be harmonic. It's like they just don't want to really interface with you because it's virtually impossible. So it lets us see communication in the language controls whether you can interface. That's why there's all these weird languages inside of some of the occult traditions. Sounds that you've never even heard or thought you could even make become the common mode of communication between you and something else, because that is the separations of the wavelengths. But still, what I'm talking about is I'm talking about breaking the matrix. I get the whole concept of how the whole thing is put together, and I'm living in it real time. But where I'm ready to go is I'm ready to go into sovereignty. You see, and those that are with me are preparing themselves for the same thing. It's just the next phase, see, because we could stay here for like ever. According to the last thing that I read, it said that man was here for, and woman was here for a perceived infinity. Why? Because we are immortals. So it's just about where you're going to spend your immortality. And to be very honest, the death thing was the hardest thing to do. It's making something impossible possible, just so you understand the vastness of this being that we are. We created something that is impossible, and this is why you know that there's no such thing as death, because we come from nothing. Every single thing that you see tells you, oh, everything's got to come from somewhere. Oh, no, trust me. You check it all the way back. It all comes from somewhere. And then you say, well, what about the soul? Where did it come from? This is like talking to a child, I always say. It's like, well, where did that come from, mommy? And then where did that come from? And then pretty soon you get to a point where you just have to put it on God. Well, God, that's what the parents do. Well, God did that. Well, God is the one. Well, where's God come from, mommy? You need to go to your room. Because these kind of questions lead the parents into uncomfortable territory where nobody has the answers to. And the reason why nobody has the answers here is because it's beyond their senses. Where we've got these 5 senses, some have a 6th sense that they're beginning to develop, but with these five base senses of sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, that is the governor. That is what actually limits the perception of everything. But at the same time, with just cause, because even now, people trying to experience everything leads to Babylonian syndrome in most cases, meaning the person starts to slip wheels in their head. All of a sudden, they are in the spiritual plane. They thought it wasn't real. Then now things are manifesting based on their thoughts. And then left brain logical side is just terrified, wants to go home, hanging on for dear life, as the person is thrusted to it through an spiritual experience that they thought was basically a game. So when we see now that this is, if you want to take it as a game, it's still something that you're actually playing in. More so than thinking that, you know, there's tons of earths and I can do whatever I want to do and I could just go to the next one when it's over with. None of that comes by way of a person not setting out that path for themselves. Why? It's because our parents, if you want to give it that term, our ancestors dropped us like seeds. And we are universes. You can't even deny that. The chakra system is the immediate universe with all the points and meridians and everything's put together. The Chinese were even showing that the brain functioning on a 74-bit processor, I Ching, showing you the ways and the changes of the myriad of colors, because even if you take a 16-color monitor, you can take those 16 colors and make them into millions of colors with the blending of them. So the reality does appear to be infinite, but it does have its limits. So the reason why it's also important to be able to tap into the limitless is because that is your recharging station. Because many people are saying, well, why would I even go out? Why would I want to go outside of time? I don't, that just sounds wild in itself. And it's because in there is where you can actually recharge. That energy is actually symbiotic with who you are as a living organism, like the actual physical body. If you can get into the zone, that actually wipes the program for a moment. Because the program is heavy. See, just like a computer, when you load all of the data of this reality and all of what it consists of and all of the different integers, that's a big load. That's how many petaflops is that? So when you can just turn it off for a moment, like, okay, well, we're going to shut James off right now, this James Bomar thing. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But right now, I just need a break. And then what you have on is the same thing that the frog has on when it's frozen, but it's still alive. It's this little small, I call it the Prius. It's extremely efficient. It burns almost no energy. It doesn't actually really need a program to be in total realization of what it is. And as you're laying in that, recharging, when you are ready to come back into this reality, it begins the moment you come back into it, because that's how dense it is. Meaning that when you get into the higher planes, all of this stuff is moving so slow. What is a person's 2 or 3 seconds is infinitum for you. This is the same phenomenon. If you want to understand it just a little bit more without experiencing it, you get into this dream. It's only been 3 minutes. You just dozed off for a second and bam, you have all of this dream. And then you get up real quick because you're late for work. And it's like, wow, how could I have crammed all of that experience into what looks like 3 minutes? And some people have different longer or shorter times. But what I'm saying is it's what I call the scope. So when you're out here really far out on orbit, which you could tell how far we are by the look of the sky, because when you get closer and closer, all the stars come together. When you get further and further away from central core, everything, you get these huge gaps in between the stars. So when you look up at the night sky, the distance between those stars and it being darkness lets us understand how far we are away from the core. Because at the core, it's never dark. All the stars come together. They're not separated as the divided entities that are after the Big Bang. So how this simulation is put together is it's put together with coordinate points, basically like what's the division in the explosion becomes the same division of the entities that are living within that field. And I don't want to make this complex, but what I'm saying is that the reason why we are not in totality is because we have spiraled away from it. And then when you start getting closer and closer back to it again, the days speed up. Literally, you know that the day should not be this short. It's like you're getting up and going to sleep over and over. I mean, just right away. It seems like you don't have enough time in the day. And this is because you're getting back to central core. And then when you arrive at that center, that's when the next activation happens. That is the birth. Now, we go through several of these cycles in one life, especially the adept who starts to get wind that this is what's going on. They're looking to run those circuits as fast as possible just to go ahead and get into the center of things. Because once you're in the center, you're in the point, now there is no circumference. You can command everything from that space, but when you're way out on the left arm, they say, oh, the Earth is out on the left arm bottom of the galaxy. That's the consciousness. That's where they put the consciousness. And so the other thing that people should see is that now the external bodies, because this is where the simulation begins, because all of what I just explained to you actually happens in the innerverse. The way you experience it is from inside of a tesseract. And for those that are familiar with the tesseract is the symbol of entry and exit from the fourth dimension. And when it unfolds into what looks like a 3-dimensional cross. So what we're talking about is we're talking about all of our development and all of our consciousness is residing right now in a place that is very similar to your mother's womb. Because in fractals, things just keep repeating. So all you have to do is just see how the whole thing was put together anyway, get a little bit of knowledge, and then start seeing how it all actually works. You're inside of a matrix or a matrix or a womb. This is the mistress, basically. And inside of the mistress womb, she still has this child, and this child is actually you. And because it's a fractal, though, you can live as the child, the husband, the old woman, the mistress, the joker. They'll keep pulling out the cards. You can live as the governor. You can live in the enchantress. You can live as and then they'll keep rolling them out. You can live as the scientist. You can live as you see what goes on in every single matrix. There's just titles being granted of people that are choosing, okay, I'll take that life. I'll open up that store. I'll be that one point and star in the universe. And turn my light on and then tell everyone that this is where you can come to and when you reach this sector of the galaxy. So what I'm saying is that there's nothing wrong with our experiences, the experience of being in physical realities. If there's anything wrong, it's when we lose control of those realities. So these conversations are not about controlling everyone else. It's about getting you back as Lord or even in dominion of this physical body, which is known as the beast. So in the beast, because it is hard to tame. The body has been through what we would perceive as millions of years with its DNA figuring things out. From amoeba to cat which is a mixture between a reptile and a feline, to demon, to reptile, now to human. Old Manny face, old shapeshifter, back at it again, going through multiple realities to gain what? One thing. One thing. This is where I was able to simplify it. What would we really need to know in physical experiences? Like, what are we really looking for? We're looking for access back to the door of immortality. And then what we do, as it talks about in the ancient traditions of the Kemetans, is we stand at that door. We don't actually go in, because everyone knew if you go in, you're not coming back out. Why? Because you cannot become everything and then become limited old, what's your name? You see what I mean? Like, you walked into everything for that moment. Do you understand how you would even be? Like, how would we deal with you? You saw everything. Imagine how you would come back looking like Moses, hair all white. But serious, think about what we're talking about. See, many people think it's a game, and I was standing at the door. I almost went completely in. I didn't know what I was looking at. But the reality is I felt the program of who James Evans Bomar was, with this kind of reality, this kind of lifestyle, knew this kind of information. I mean, the left brain was just trying to grab onto all that as much as it could, because it was being sucked into everything, where you fully connect with the entire organism. And then I realized that's what they did. What the greatest adepts were able to do was they were able to stand in two worlds. It's like that alchemical painting. You got one on one side and one on the other. And the interesting thing is the body is an example that we already accomplished it. And so the actual composition of the body, just as itself is in having a soul, means that it's already in two worlds. Surely you go to sleep and some still dream, but having access to those worlds is what's really getting difficult. So we can see now in the reality, there's clearly a group of individuals that they don't even have to be reptiles. They could be humans within themselves and also still be reptiles, but have tapped into a side of their consciousness where they say, well, if we control everything through knowledge, because that's the only way, that through languages, if we take all of the secrets basically, and then introduce this simulation, when people start hearing about or even experiencing what it's like to be their activated parents and activated ancestors, they'll either think they went crazy, or they'll think it's not true, they won't believe it, and they'll deny it themselves, and thus they'll become their own police. They'll stay polarized to either a black or white, either ultra pure or completely evil. And in that, they will never make the connection that they're all the same thing, and then actually merge this inside of their body, bringing forth what would be then a marriage, right? Like marrying the left side and the right side, as some see the physical and the spiritual, as on earth, also in heaven, and heaven also on earth, and then bring them together. Because that takes the compassion of the Kundalini, or the compassion of Christ. Because it's only Kundalini that can stand in the face of some of these creatures and actually not be moved by it. That means unmovable, unshakable, because it sees them only as another variations of the multitude of entities that were created by none other than ancestors' parents, which we also are. So now we also introduce for a moment the paradox. See, the word would have never been introduced if there wasn't a such thing. But the paradox is basically two things that seem like they can't happen together, but somehow they're happening together. This is where our compensation needs to come in, because we're in an organism that basically has come from nowhere. Paradox. Most people here don't know what happens when they die, yet they're here. Paradox. Most people, you see, so when the paradoxes keep coming and they're not solved, this leads to disarray. Because when a major question comes up, if nobody has a solution for it, like where did this come from? And who am I really? If no one has those answers, then they introduce this kind of disarray, this kind of chaos within the being, because now they don't have any roots. And so a big thing about this is that we can see now that an unrooted person doesn't do very well into their spiritual experiences. They just get blown away. gone with the flow. While a rooted person is actually able to actually transcribe much of what they're even experiencing back to everyone else, because they're so rooted into the reality, into the mother, into the memories, into the memory banks, showing that you're not supposed to forget everything. What you're actually supposed to do is resolve it, refine it, distill it, distill the experiences all into this strong point. Like all of our experiences of what we've experienced in the Matrix, we're actually able to say, man, they sure did get one over me on that time, man. Woo, I didn't know they could create something like that. Next time I'm going to do the creating. That'll be the last time I let somebody else build something for me. See, it'll be more like that rather than this Illuminati, I'm going to kill, I'm going to destroy, and just going right back into the same muck that everyone else is stuck in. Because you have to admit that if you do make it, and you will, through this, what you would have gained would be priceless. So this is why I see that earth, it connects itself with what's called the salt. Okay, and they say humans are the salt of the earth. Of course, salt is what gives food most of the time the flavor, right? But this is also what causes currents or currency. That's why most of the ocean is salt water, because it's all of that current moving around. Even they call when you go buy something to sell it. The word S-A-L means salt. Even when you get paid, they say this is your salary. S-A-L, it means salt. And it's because the conductivity of this energy that we're generating while we're still trying to figure it out is still being used for something. And this is what we have to begin to recall is soon as possible, because even just today I picked up this butter knife personally, and then I just felt something like if it was an ankh or something, maybe it would have done something, but because it's just a butter knife, there goes the ability. So we're so far off. I mean, if it was a dorje, which I know to be one of the actual things that were used by our ancestors to bring a consistent flow of the current. It would be like a double-edged lightsaber on the spiritual plane, putting the two middle fingers onto the two grooves in the dorje rod. And you can even see on the dorje rod, the original ones, there's even a line of copper cable that connects the top with the bottom. And then you look at the design and the designs of a generator. You can just get them, you can find them on eBay, because nobody knows what they do anymore. So this is the powers, in a sense, that have been stripped from us that are about to be restored to some sovereigns. Now, notice I didn't say it was going to be restored to everyone. And the reason is because some people are so deluded at times that they would just take that power and then push it right back into the same thing that's causing the issue. So we need to also realize that the reason why many people have not gone into high levels of current is because it would be clearly destructive, because they would use all that current. Oh, they could get a bottle of mega hydrate and, oh, thank you, God, for leading me to the mega hydrate. Man, mega hydrate is hydrogen. Whether it was God or the devil, it would still do the same thing if you had gotten a hold of it. To get a hold of it would be the knowledge and wisdom. So it's ascribing things that we can all do in this reality, if we have the knowledge, to some unseen force that's not ourselves, would be to disempower ourselves. So the entire reality is just designed just like that, just to give your power away. If you give your power away to something, oh, thank you, great archangel. We ain't seen this archangel in how long? Why can't this archangel? I mean, what would be the big deal with the archangel? Oh, God said the archangels can't manifest. Okay, well, let's go to talk to God then. Well, God's not talking. Actually, the Pope said he talked to God. Let's go talk to the Pope. See, the whole thing stinks to high heaven, truly. And no wonder why. And you know what? I like this, though. Some people say, well, what do you mean you like it? I like this because now it gives me the reason why it's being run as such. It's like no wonder why. See, people are not used to troubleshooting. And when you troubleshoot something for days and days and days and you can't figure it out, when you finally figure out what the problem is, you're like, oh my goodness, the joy of finding the solution to that outweighs the actual problem itself, because that means in the future, you'll check that first. So it's the same thing with this reality. When we see what's really behind, where is the seat of our power? It is in that right brain. It is in that dream world and being able to control that dream world. It is in that astral plane. It is in that kundalini and the chakra centers and the lights, the different projections that come from the head when one has already gotten the body activated to certain degrees, right? So we know that it's there. And where is that at? It's in the right side. So what is hindering the right side? The left brain logic. The left brain that doesn't make any sense, that's founded all of its knowledge on language, that just uses logic based on what another person has said, based on what another person said. Oh, no wonder why. And then so now we can also do a little dance too, because this means it's not going to take long to fix this. See, some people may be wrestling with the message. I just don't understand what he's saying. He's going so fast. But other people they just are lined up for it. They get it. So what I'll say to them is that their responsibility also is to keep being the conductors and the bridges just like I am. So it steps itself down. So rather than stepping down the message, what you just do is you use different converters. There'll be hundreds of people listening to this conversation. Each person will hear something different. This is the other thing that I found quite interesting. You don't mistake that you know what people are really hearing. It's like we always assume that people, if we say something, that everyone's going to hear that the same way. And everything around us shows us that that's not how it works. Each person has their own filter system that they've configured the way that they want it based on their lifestyle and their activities. So when you say something to them, it gets decrypted. And a friend of mine was just in the back room and saw this with his own third eye. When the language is spoke, it comes out as a symbol and a code. Now, it's moving so fast you can't see it. As I told you, the world is very dense. So when you get into the higher stages of consciousness and the oscillations, the frames per second start to increase, you can see because sound. When you become light, sound is slow. But when you're flesh, sound is fast. So when we switch into light mode, now when we say something, we can see what it does, right? And then we start to shut up because it's like, whoa, I didn't know those words mean that. And I must didn't know the code to the matrix. So then what happens next, though, is that as you begin to take in this sound, it then, because the consciousness doesn't speak English, so it's got to
hope not.
Right, I hope not. Exactly. Well, I think it's trying to start, which would lead to why we're still here. But it tries to decrypt it, obviously, because it doesn't speak that language. Then it decrypts it and then re-encrypts it back into a language that it understands and then files it. Because after all, how can you recall something if it's not being filed? And in what language is it being filed in? And this is what started allowing us to see the simulation more and more, first hypothetically, but then once the faculties were activated, you were able to see the correlations with what you were looking at. So what I'm saying is that if you've never seen something before, you can identify it. And this is why the knowledge does assist us. Because when you start seeing that, then you can actually be the bridge or the interpreter to explaining to people, okay, this is exactly how it works. When the voice goes out, there is an actual packet that goes out. Now, there's also some packet loss. This means that people didn't understand what you said. And then when it goes into their brain, it is then decrypted as best as possible. Like if a lady was talking Chinese to you right now and you don't understand it, you hear it, the brain takes it and it goes, like I can't decrypt it. I don't have that data, right? And so what also happens though is for the right side of the brain, if we would stop dominating it so much, if it went through the right side would be like, oh, this is what's being said. Based on the rhythm, the vibration, see, it uses a whole different integer. It's not, based on what we learned in math class with the teacher Lee, she said, konnichiwa. Oh, no, that's actually Japanese. Okay, well, I don't know what she's saying. But if you ask the right brain, what is she saying? Right brain would be like, well, I think based on what the tone and the vibration is, she's saying, get out of her house. You know, I'm just but serious. What I'm saying is that there's a whole nother level of interpretation that goes on from the right side of the brain, and it's able to speak all these languages.
right? All these shapes, forms, and fashions, because it reads in that encryption. And this is also where we get an opportunity to see that, first of all, humans are not the only thing in existence. And this language that we're using is specific to us being here on this specific planet. And so when we get into understanding more languages, mainly light, you can also understand the language of water, though, because water is a frequency. Anything that has a frequency is on a language system. And for humans, the main thing to just bypass all the dogma and bypass all the stumbling blocks that have been set up for you, because there's been a lot of weaving going on in this reality. To bypass all that, you go to the biome. You have to go directly to the elements. Fire, earth, wind, water. They all speak. And then when you hear, if you can comprehend, then you can phase lock. And if you can phase lock, then it's like basically, okay, I have wind in my cabinet. I have fire in my cabinet. I have earth in my cabinet. I have water in my cabinet. And then when I mix the different variations of that in my alchemical cabinet, then I can come out with any variation to the reality, right? No, excuse me, into the inner space. This is where it goes first. It's an inception before it is a conception. So it manifests first in the inner space. And then, if ye are a God, you can pronounce the word behind what you want to manifest. And that word will come all the way from the root of your feet, all the way up through the body, whipping itself up a coil until finally it comes out of your mouth. And then bam, right in reality, spontaneous manifestation. How do we know that this happens? It's because the body is a universe and sound is the seed. And when you take this, if you could take the sound, and this is our English language, the other half of it does, but the half that we know, the 26, which is 26 plus 26 is 52 cards. Okay, so that's the Kabbalah, that's this language. But we only have 26 letters, so 26 is half of the ball. That means you will use half of the manifestation. There was a book that was written a long time ago for kids. It was called Half Magic. It meant that you have to wish for something twice to get it one time. And this is because the bottom of the body is not being used. Like our gut, even in our throats, because this is also because the body is set up as a fractal, what it would be is deep in the throat. As you see the Tibetans, they do the throat chant. It comes all the way down from almost the solar plexus, the voice first, building itself all the way up through and then out the mouth. Now, the thing is also, you're not manifesting Lamborghinis. Like these people are saying specific words. Like they're not even saying a multitude of words. Because at the end of the day, it's just about energy, 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 energy. It's ohms. It's a generator. So the body is coaxed to keep generating. Hey, and then so to a certain point where when even the body falls asleep, it's still and that's all the right brain needs to go on, because now old left brain is hypnotized. Left brain is now got something to do. Left brain's like a child, and that's why they show even the angels are like the child, and y'all the Baal is like the child, and all these different entities, many have a very bad rap, come in the form of children to show their immaturity. And so the child has something to play with, and then the right brain can now continue its expansion on what it really came here to do. And the reason why, some people may wonder, well, why is this like this? It's because, see, what these parts of our, not only our consciousness, but also these animals and these elements, they're our children. They're actually our children. And we're supposed to be teaching them. And then where we're at is we're at the apex. That means that's the highest on the rung in the physical reality is the human being. Some people say, no, humans are not. So don't kid yourself. If you keep kidding yourself, somebody's going to drop one of these nuclear ions on you. These people these human beings are much more advanced than you think. It's just about how advanced are you? Are we still being the grain? Are we still being, instead of being the millstone, are we actually being the prime mover or the sun? Or are we just hanging out on Venus? You know, all out on Pluto even. It's like just the whole Plutonian state of consciousness is just hazardous like Hitler, right? Or, you know, just lost in time with old Mr. Planet X. That's actually Saturn. Some people thought Planet X was Nibiru. Planet X, look, X in math is times, okay? Time. So the planetary symbol of Saturn was X, also known as Satan, meaning Satan, tin, a tin man. And again, lords of technology. It's not just one. It's a specific state of consciousness. It's the consciousness even of a scientist, even of a Metatronist. You see, so in this reality, we just have to realize that when you keep choosing all this stuff, start choosing the resource itself, not the current or the cash. Because when you just get the cash, it's already been stepped on. It's the talisman, and it's got all these weird writings on it, and it's in their God they trust, and you know you can't generate your own power, none of your powers. See, a lot of the things that we see in the reality that we look over are directly spiritual related. How can, if you have true power, it's coming from when you switch on that light, that power is coming from you, not SDG&E or, you know, PG&E or all these other power companies. That's how they keep their power. That's how they keep power. And this is what it's about, grounding also all of what we know about spirituality into this plane, because it actually is existing here. So, you know, we could take, you know, a moment and maybe answer some questions and things. There is a little bit more to go into the message. We did cover waxing and waning in the spiral, which is something that I really wanted to knock home. And it has a lot to do with our energy principles, because when you're waning away from the spiral, this means you're spiraling out. You're going further and further out into the orbit. Now you're just further and further away from the solar point or the core. That's when things get rough. It's dark out there. But as you know what I'm talking about. I mean, everyone on this phone that's been involved in spirituality knows what we're talking about, because it seems like we are inclined to go in the wrong direction first, because that's where the lessons begin. And then you start realizing, well, maybe if I just turn this whole thing around and change, have my own pole shift, have my own 2012, then I can get to a more perfected side of my consciousness. But of course, that's our process. That's our procession. So we see ourselves still no different as even the sun. The sun, we have our own Kali Yugas. It's like we could spend 10,000 years in darkness of the mind, like, oh my goodness, I'm just not getting it. Why do I keep going through these relationships? Versus, man, you are a solar stellar being, immortal, innovative, sovereign. You see, the titles, the variations are totally different. But the only way we will receive that is if we spiral back into the central point and central core of ourselves, inner space, also which coined the term to innerstand, because if you don't understand something, then you'll fall for anything. Raise the jed. This means that you come out of the coccyx of your spine with the kundalini, with the tail between the legs, literally, and hurt from all of the situations that has been going on. It rises itself as it battles back through the chakras that have been taken over, all the different points, even on the zigzag paths as it's trying to make its way back to the throne. And then it will come up through the front door rather than the back door. And it'll come up through the front door, slam open the door, and then tell old Rex, who's actually there, the dweller, that to pack their stuff and get ready to get back down into the lower areas and do its job like it was supposed to be doing. See, nobody, I'm not saying this is the compassion of the Kundalini. Nobody is going to perish. They're going to get purified and refined. And if it was hot, if you got fire in the mind, let's say, but no water, then it just needs to be put back into the hearth, which is the Muladhara chakra area of the body, put back there so it can start burning up some of the toxins so we can get on with the show already. I mean, people are saying even now, they're like, well, yeah, you know, if we really do come into something that's going to let people live longer and let us live forever, they ain't never going to tell everyone, because then a planet with 8 billion people living forever would be like a disaster. And in the way things are now, that is understandable. But the reality is, baby, if 8 billion activated. Oof. See, I talk about the day after ascension because there's surely going to be that day. I can refer to that at any point as a Time Lord. If you can move in through and out time, you can go to when you activate it. I mean, hello. So when I go to the day after activation, it seemed to be billions of people on the planet that all activated. It was a chain reaction. And this stuff is so simple. It's like when you get electrocuted. If someone's getting electrocuted and you touch them, what happens? You get electrocuted. Now, it just so happens, though, that prana and kundalini and chi are assimilable for the body. So the electrocution at times feels good if the channel is not blocked. So what happens is that when the kundalini starts awakening, they say it's going to awaken in the planet at a certain point. I'm just working to get my stuff together so I don't fall off the wave when the planet's kundalini activates. Then all the beings that are standing on a conductor, oh my goodness, if you just think about this stuff, it just sounds so simple. But you can just see how it's all being set up from another side of time. All the human beings with their shoes on, grounded, standing on top of the conductor. The conductor activates into a whole nother energy that we have never even felt before unless we understood about Kundalini. And then what will happen for those who are not prepared for that energy, that have those block channels, is they will just go into the state of consciousness that they manifest through the acceleration of their energy. Because manifestation comes with the acceleration of energy. Every occultist knows this. Every adept knows this. So when the energy begins to build, if the person is still tied into left brain logical side, what would they begin to manifest? A termination program. They'll actually self-terminate. Not meaning they'll kill themselves, meaning that they'll actually start carrying on with the activities that lead to them being dead like they are now. But the individual who starts to get a whiff of that wave and starts to get on that current, because remember, the wave is strong. It's not your strength necessarily. You just need to ride the wave.
Oh, hold on.
Right, yeah, you hold on, exactly. Like it'd be like being in Hawaii with one of them huge waves. If you ride that thing and then you get all the way to the shore, they ain't gonna do nothing but take pictures and give you a trophy. But if you fall off that thing, it's like, ooh, is he all right in there? Is she all right in there? So this is a real thing, though. The energy, as you know, just like I know, and we're just telling the audience, it comes through in waves. And the body does need to, well, let me just explain like this, because see, there's a tri-merge going on here. There's the mind, body, and soul. And why people want to give a lot of credit to the soul alone and just ignore the body, they don't realize that the procession into higher states of consciousness is through the body. You actually leave the body. So this is the same thing as you're leaving Earth. But except for you're going out into space, you're going into inner space. So this is the only difference between the true propulsion system of a human being and as being a time traveler. You activate into these higher frequencies and then you implode. Implosion is the key. It's cold fusion. It's actually the key to how the Kundalini is moving through the body. It's also the key to why a man can create a semen, which is basically a microscopic version of a man, because it just imploded itself, made itself into a little itty bitty. So to see that on a spiritual plane, you can implode yourself into this small point, smaller than an atom, and go right through the fabric of realities in this little ship that's so powerful, it just doesn't have any problems, because if any big ogre, just right through it. It's like ogre is just too big. It's like I just went right through ogre's pores and out the other side, meaning that all of this, what's supposed to be big and bad, even God, doesn't have anything on the totally collected, collapse all the Russian dolls, collapse all the archonic chakra centers into one central point in ball. Then when you're collapsing them, it's like folding cards. Then there's finally two left. That's even the masters, Dynamo Jack, Qigong Master, two energies, right one below the perineum, I believe that is, and then right in the navel. And then the last point is to put them together, to force them together. Because remember, like, these are two opposing poles. This is literally like you and the person that you do not like becoming forced together because you cease to become any of them anymore. It's like you come out of that whole thing and say, I collapse it. And some people think coming together means you got to go over there and kiss them and all that. Look, what I'm saying is that all of the whole thing is collapsed together. So that means that there's really no actions in that except for innerstanding when you finally have triumphed over the duality and begin to make it into the other planes. And then that's your reference point. And like I said, it's a paradox because you also live in a dualistic world, but you're not of the dualistic world. I said, I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world. And because now you're on the right side of the brain. The left side of the brain is now the world as we know it. When you activate the right side of the brain, the world actually renders an entirely different vista. And I'm here to tell people that when you turn on this right brain, that same tree that you're looking at, it becomes something so much more. And just like, of course, the people that you're looking at, the people that are around you, they become so much more. But it's going to take compassion, because this is what I was even showed just recently, is that still realize, though, until a person perfects their spheres, when you can see what they really are, not so much as what they are to become, because that's actually what the compassion is. You can see both of those. You see, again, the compassion is that you can see what they are and you can see what they're to become. But if you only can see what they are, you can't have any compassion, because it's like, oh my goodness, I can't deal with this person. It looks like some kind of demon. See, people don't understand that when a person continuously treks into areas like, let's say the old club, which, I've frequented before, and then you get all tainted with all these different ideas and all these different states of consciousness. What that looks like from the right side of the brain standpoint is very similar to a deformed monster. Until someone comes in and what they call it, with the Beauty and the Beast, and takes old Beast and starts to groom him and put the ribbon in the head and take him to this next stage of understanding feelings and compassion. And this is all things that we're doing with ourselves. I can definitely understand and relate to times where through a Saturnalian sphere, this means being born in cities where there's all electronics or trons. And then you're into that whole lead-based, silver-based mentality like the iPad and the MacBooks are. And then you develop this gray shield around the body, 50 shades of it. And then the person is basically stuck in that field. Then every time one would react to something, it would be from a Saturnalian standpoint. So a Saturnalian is not just these individuals with this cult that they getting together at night. It's them too. But it's the frequency overall of not having any feelings. So that's why they say when a person gets old, they run the danger of becoming an old crone. By the way, Saturnalian is basically like a Miss Doubtfire. It's not a male, or it's a male and a female. So that crone phase or chronos phase of the person's consciousness comes when they get burned out. They can't keep firing the energy through their body because there's been too much duality. They feel like there's no reason to have there's no mission, so there's no purpose. And then that enters, because nobody dies, it enters a ghost kind of phase. And then the ghost is only really looking to drain energy from others. Because have you ever had a Saturnalian around? Just someone everyone's dancing and that one guy is just sitting there, that one girl sitting there, and she's just like, she never dances. And it's just because of the situations that have occurred, right? But on the spiritual side, when you look at her, you see this gray aura all around the body. And it's like a shell that's built itself up. So what the Kundalini does is it breaks those shells. And here's the other interesting part. And I'm glad I remembered this very briefly. I'm going to say this and we'll take a break or take some calls. But I found out that in meditating on the ant, tapping into the ant frequency, to the ants that revolted, what they explained to me is that when a person goes through a planetary field and they don't make it through, they become that planet's excrement. Okay, and this is where the word klipo, or a shade, comes from, which was in Kabbalah known as the worlds, the physical worlds. And it's because, see, every single planetary system that we're inside of is also digesting. It's either digesting us or about to regurgitate us. You see what I mean? And if we're digested, if you go through, let's say, the Venusian field, and you get digested, when you come out of that portal, you will have a concave eye, like what you see with a snake. And it's because the precession of that pentagram that Venus is tracing out in the sky equals that kind of geometry. So basically, you become divided through a processing system of not making it through planetary experiences. And how that division manifests is that the vessel that you become next has the correspondences of that particular planetary system. And this is why you can relate, like the Uranus is the goat. The eye is sidereal. Like notice the eye on a goat is going in the opposite direction. That's because the planet that it's from is on its other side. You see, it's been kicked over onto the other side. So, and this may be just inserting knowledge in not into necessarily the proper place, but it's basically the knowledge of that the eyes are really the portals. As I said, the eye is the gateway to the soul. That doesn't just apply for human beings. Like we get so conceited about not even thinking that these other creatures that live here don't have souls or something. What's their story? Well, their story is that they went through this same kind of process, except when they keep going through certain spheres. So first of all, you can't even judge because you don't know what they were before. So you can't say that they're either going up or they're going down. So you don't know if the lion's about to become a man next. You don't know if the dog's about to become. See, in every epoch, there's a specific animal that is closest to reincarnating as an actual human being next. On this planet, it is the dog or the Canaan. And that's because Venus is the portal that most of the bodies, that the physical bodies, and the one that used to have the tail, is created from. Back a while ago, it was another planetary sphere that had more to do with Hanuman, had more to do with the monkey. That has a lot to do with the moon sphere and what the entities that actually came from the moon. And so each of these epochs, as I'm calling them, produces a different kind of body. And down the range, you see certain kind of variations. And where we're at now is we're actually at the top. And this means that this life, forget next life, because you don't even know, you may recall some past lives, or how do you even know that those are yours? Just focus on this life. As I said, the time is now. Be in the present. This life, if you can possibly start grasping some of this stuff that's being mentioned or your own intuition about progressing with this, go all the way. And remember, for a while, you're going to need to be your own motivation, but it's a lot more easier if you're taking your tubes out of some of the things that are pulling energy from you and sucking energy from you through especially the belief, and then plug them back into yourself, because you're the only person you need to be believing in. As they say, believe in yourself. That's all I tell you when they're trying to motivate you. Hey, kid, believe in yourself. So don't believe in something all in the sky, all far, that never visits. That's not where it's going to be at. It's going to be inside. That's where you'll be able to gain the most power in. But guess what? When you go inside, you'll also find us there. See, some people associate being inside with being alone. Actually, no, it's where the real people are. Because the outside and external is where all the fakeness is. That's why if a person ingests a lot of things that become distasteful to them, they don't want to be inside anymore. So that even in the reality, if I take in through my portals, this is in my head, I have 7 portals, 2 eyes, 2 nose, 2 ears, and a mouth. And I'm taking in all this stuff. I'm eating all this crazy stuff. I'm hearing all this crazy music. I'm seeing all these crazy things. So when all of that comes in, that's the last place that I want to be. That's like being at someone's house after somebody threw a party and you're just living there. It's like, it's a mess in here, right? So what's the next move? To go outside. So this is the natural procession actually of how the human being now especially has become so external. So it's now, let's just talk about everybody. Oh, did you see so-and-so? They just not getting it, just not conscious, and just blah, 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 blah. And it's because what's still inside can't be faced. And that's why I like a lot of the substances that take a person back inside, such as the ayahuasca, because it now shows you that there's quite a few monsters that need to be wrestled down inside that have been ignored. It's like the whole thing is overrun. It's like all of a sudden you come home and the kids have torn everything up. And it's like, yo, what happened here? Well, you said you were coming back and you didn't come back. So this is actually the return of Christ, to tell you the truth. It's the return of Kundalini, right? So Kundalini comes back and it's like, yo, what happened to my house? See, some people see this so external. See, they think this is going to happen to the world. They're like, oh, God's going to come back in the skies and get pissed off, totally trash the place. These folks with oil, make them stop. And then I didn't have anything to do with it. It was Exxon. It was Texaco. I did sign a petition, but they wouldn't stop, God. So you're going to take me? Some people think it's all about that because they were led astray. They were led outside. They were wandered after the stars, as the real Jesus said. Right? Because there's some real books in the Nag Hammadi that if there was ever some kind of Christ, that was what was being written. And they said, oh, yeah, what happened? Oh, they wandered after the stars. They started looking into the stars and then started going after these individual frequencies rather than going into themselves. And so when you go into yourself, it starts to introduce to you, okay, well, shoot, it's been a long time since I've been here. You don't even know where you put the key. It's like you go into the body and you say, man, this is a mess, especially if you try to go in at 50, 60. I'm just now getting in there at night. I started going in on the body like 30, right? So I go on a body of 30. So now 30 of this lifestyle and our age bracket is like 90 because of just the acceleration. We got the lever floored on the Donzi, as far as the experiences that we're having to trashing the body, right? It's up all night, 2 days, still drinking and smoking and, club to club. And, when it's finally 30 years later, like I said, it's like a 90-year-old body. And here you come talking about, oh, well, honey, I'm home. And, prodigal son is back home and now finding that the place is now needing to be cleaned up. And then not to mention, again, the first thing is to get back into your mind. And I want people to start seeing this. It's a real thing. Lay it out as a multi role-playing game. The first place is back to the castle. And guess what? Someone else is sitting on your throne. And when you get there, that particular part of yourself will try to incite all of the other parts of you against you. Oh, and that's the accuser. That's why they call it being the dweller, the accuser, because, oh, you left us. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. You should have followed God. And, all of these different things that they'll keep telling you. And all that does is it makes you the victim. It gives you the sentence through conviction. And then the person turns right back around, walks back down the spine, tail between the legs, crawls up in the coccyx, curls up into the ball, deactivates, and goes back into a Kali Yuga. That's the actual procession of many individuals that have sought to overthrow the consciousness that they created. Because remember, like in your body, you're the only one having the experience. You're the only one looking through these eyes. And then all the different circumstances that you've brought yourself throughout time are now still resident at this point. And so what we're introducing is real solutions to dealing with that, because the soul is also about fire. And that's why one of these major elements is fire. In fact, the fire element is where most occultists stop on this plane. They never do actually get in the water to figure out how to rain on that seed that they create. And the seed just goes nuts and just crackling up and then burns up because they can't rain on it. This means that through all the anger is what develops the seed, because the anger is what brings the passion. But then once the seed is in full formulation, if you can't switch from anger to compassion, right, and then rain on it, then it doesn't grow up to be anything. So this is also why we can assist each other, because some are extremely polarized into one of these elements and need other elements. And this is all of why we try to find twin flames and try to find other people to have relationships with. And I'm not even talking about just sexual relationships, even friendships, because they possess some kind of other element that we see as being in diametric opposition to what we are, thus being able to balance us out. And so, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, to learn to integrate it through the mirror. I've worked with runes my whole life. I found them when I was like 7.
Yeah,
and I know that that the symbols on the runes, the 26 runes, that they're based on what they're in our DNA and what all the languages came from. But at the back of that book is something that I found right before my Kundalini. It said, go into your cell, into yourself. And that's exactly why those relationships you're talking about are mirrors for us, because it's something that we perceive it outside of ourselves because we haven't accepted it within ourselves, and we need to integrate it and realize those dragons are ourselves.
Yeah, and and it's a good thing that you brought that up too, because just to tell the listener, because people they like the way I bring across the conversation, so I'm not going to play with babies. Like, this is not a conversation with babies. So the reality is that the big word is the big two words is and fast, because what happens is that there's still so much that we need to understand of how things work. Because like the runes cut holes directly into the inner space to bring forth specific levels of frequencies and energies that are used for manifestations for certain things. And in fact, language in itself was so sacred to the point where there wasn't really much being communicated verbally, because the moment talking began to go on, only manifestation was going to go on after that. So there was just much contemplation as what was going to be manifested. And so this is letting us see that, well, it's first just even getting this thing back online again, and even getting it up to the task, and getting it to a point where it starts to show us some of the experience that we are really something beyond what everyone has been saying. And so just understand what I'm saying to everyone on the phone today is that the beginning of this is cracking the shell. Like having that first massive spiritual experience to show you, oh, well, yeah, this is got to be tons going on, because what I just saw, and just to see, it just solidifies everything, because you're literally seeing people on TV. Nobody's talking about it there. Surely Putin knows about it. Surely, you start seeing clearly that some people know about this high level of our spirituality, but nobody's saying anything. And that just gets eerie within itself. And that eeriness starts to push a person further and further into breaking the matrix for themselves, because they realize that the whole thing will be a lie until they do that. And that's just really how it is. And it's not because just so much as everyone is lying to us. It's because how we're perceiving things on these limited faculties that we've got attached to can only show us a fraction of what is really here. It literally, a phi-based fraction of what is literally in existence is what we're experiencing. And then we've grown so accustomed to it. Some can go 72, 80 years of just doing it and saying, oh, well, I lived a good life. Or you haven't even lived. What are you talking about? But the only way a person can say that, and we were talking about this the other day, the only way a person can say that is if they have went beyond. And then the reality is that, and it's not even a conceitedness, and it's not any of that. When you go beyond, you already know who's gone and who's not, because it's the way they talk. It's what they say, right? Because when you start going and you start experiencing that, what increases is actually your energetic properties. Intelligence, innovation, glass becomes half full at that point rather than half empty. You stop seeing things as insurmountable, because it's like, man, what I just saw is that there is really some kind of unlimited energy. So just based on that alone, if you're just a good reverse engineer, you say, well, if there's something unlimited, then that means that there's nothing that doesn't have a solution. It's just all about the formulas. I guess I got to get to work and understand the formulas. And then you look at the periodic table and you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to take all my life. And then so somebody slams that down and says, look, it's fire, earth, wind, water. Like all of this stuff that man created, this is foolishness to supreme beings. You just need to master the elements, because that's what you were originally supposed to be. Hello, you are the master of the elements. Alice, wake up in Wonderland. The elements are enchanting you. Because I even watched this, that the elements are so mesmerizing. And that's why they connect many of these elements with goddesses. And it's because if you're not conscious, it's like everyone has a masculine and feminine side. It's unavoidable to see at this point. But for those who don't know, you have a masculine and feminine side. So if you enter a spiritual plane, in many cases, if you've never been there before, you enter as a passive being. And then something can exercise dominance over you. And it all is about whether you're balanced or not. If you go in balanced, then basically you're not seeing anything beyond what you want to see. But if you go in unbalanced, one of your poles is driving what you're seeing. And it's just manifesting it step after step after step, faster than you can even see unless you're quick. Because if you're quick, you can actually see, what I'm thinking, I'm manifesting. And see, in the dream is when you're almost too slow, because the person that's dream is not in control of their dream, doesn't have access to the higher light. So that means they can't actually go lucid because they don't have the access to the higher spectrum of themselves. And so they're kind of just watching the dream. And then the reason why they think that the dream is being caused by some other phenomena beside themselves is because it seems to be unfolding and unfolded already as they're inside of it. And this is because they're using an eye, just like even being on this world, you use an eye that is so slow, two eyes mainly, seeing in duality, it's so slow, it can't actually see what's going on. Versus when you turn on and activate the higher eye, the central eye, then you see where all the emanations and all the manifestations come from. And I know I said that earlier, but again, I'm reiterating it once more, that when to be able to see into that sphere where things are taking place before what goes on here is actually the power that if someone has access to, that's what's allowing them to predict the future. And it's not because some demon is telling them, they may have created that, or some angel is telling them. No, it's because they created a vehicle, sometimes called an eidolon, that they pumped belief into so much that it became animate. And then they sent that into, because where that space is, that all those things are created, doesn't have time. It's devoid of time. So in that outside of time space, those kinds of consciousness move around. The goal, though, is to get yourself into that outside of time space and to begin to operate yourself from that reality and this reality. And again, that's the paradox. Some people say, well, how am I doing that? How could I be in two worlds at the same time? I don't know. Ask the Supreme Being. Oh, that means ask yourself. See, that's what makes it like a serpent eating its tail. You even have to get the knowledge from yourself. It's like, how did you do that again? Man, you've been doing so much stuff, you even forgot. Did you forget how you even got to this world? How did you get in the body? So these are the kind of things that we hone in on. We feel like it only takes one of us that we truly trust to figure that out. And then we all start simultaneously having those same experiences or already had those experiences and just didn't understand exactly what we're looking at. And so it has a whole different kind of feel to it, what we're introducing, because it actually feels like home. It feels like something that a person can resonate with, because even though they may have a difficult time unloading old logic, to just see the rhythm in my voice. Because hearing the eloquence of speech and the long words and comprehending those is one thing. But if you hear the rhythm in the voice, what the rhythm in the voice is saying is, we've cracked it.
Heaven, yeah. And to be honest, I don't want to interrupt you or stop your flow here, but we have 1 million callers on the board.
Well, let's do that.
7, and yeah.
Actually, are we at an hour and 45 minutes?
We're at an hour and 39 minutes right now.
Okay, so why don't we just take the duration of time to take some calls?
Okay. No, absolutely. And like I said, I definitely want to have you back if you'll come.
Oh, for sure.
I did just want to say quickly before I open the caller lines that I usually, when I talk about the Kundalini experience, there's only two things I say. One is that it's ineffable, meaning it's indescribable. It's completely, you have to experience it to be able to, but you've taken a lot of that out of it for me today. Even though I experienced it, it was really wonderful to hear you. And the other was that the other thing I came back from Kundalini is the only thing that we fear is our own power. Because when you face it, it's just beyond. Yeah. But with that, I want to open up the callers. I'm going to open up in order quickly here. I have so many, but you've all been in line. So the first caller is area code 347, last 4 digits 8180. I also want to say anyone else who wants to call in, our caller number is 347-996-5226. I don't think we'll be able to get to you today if you're not already on the line, but we will be having 7 back. And I didn't even take a music break or station break because I didn't want to break up this amazing flow. So caller 347, last 4 digits 8180. You're on the air. Welcome to Consciousness Caffeine.
Hi, Wholeness. How are you doing?
Wholeness.
Excellent. How are you?
Great. Sevan, how you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm doing exceptionally well. I'm having a little trouble hearing you. You may want to get a little closer to the line.
Yeah, I'm actually on the train. I just got off work, and I'm actually in transit going to a meeting. But I was watching something that was posted on the Astral Quest last night, the holographic disclosure. And when they was talking about how the Egyptians kind of like, I think you had said it too, like the Egyptians didn't want to stay here. They were trying their best to get off the planet. But now I see a big turnaround in everybody trying to be Egyptians. Even myself, I got married a few years ago, and we got married up under Cleopatra's Needle, and we changed our name to one name. And the question I really want to get at is, like, me and my wife, we're trying to find out how to get past the name. Like, you know, we picked a name called, we used Nefer Kanum, which we believe it to mean a beautiful molding or a beautiful fashioning. And I noticed that Kanum was the ram-headed deity. And I did some minor study on Kanum and the ram, and the ram is he's a real prick. Like, he's always high debatable. You know, he's always trying to, and even though I'm a Libra, I find that, you know, I'm every zodiac. You know, I have an Aries type of head, because I do find myself with horns at times, you know, always in combat or always opposing. And I guess, like, what I'm trying to figure out is, like, where do I go now that I'm leaving Egypt alone? Like, it seems like I was almost trapped in the pyramid with Murdu, and now I don't want to, you know, before I get launched into another paradigm, you know, because even when I dream, I rarely dream about Egypt. And a lot of my art is, like, I use Egypt as, like, a sketchbook. People be like, well, why are you always making Egypt stuff? I'd be like, because it's easy. You know, but I really want my art and my whole life to be more whole and change, and I don't want to get stuck into no fantasy, no self-grandizement of days of old. So I guess could you just really just, like, split the whole marriage thing in half and just show me, like, where are we going wrong and trying to unify without knowing self first? Thank you.
Sure. Well, you know, first of all, I wouldn't look at it as going wrong. I mean, I see this every bit as a ziggurat, that different cultures have a piece of something that is a whole, and you can see that easily in excuse me, there's some background noise, so you may want to hit the mute button, but you can see that easily as the different variations in races, which could easily be seen as the colors. And then when you shine a light into a prism, it makes those colors. So what we're seeing is that in each culture, they have a specific main entity or godhead that is the major emanation of the frequency that actually created that specific tribe. Now with Kanum is basically, or the ram head is basically a Jupiterian structure. So if you would take that back into, let's say, the Greek traditions and many of the traditions, because many people think that, you know, each tradition is different and has some better highlights than the other, but the reality is it's been the same archonic playing field. That's why you still see stars, hearts, pentagrams, six-pointed stars, and all those kind of things on down through time. And so what it really is about gaining the lesson, realizing when the lesson is complete, and then if you still feel like there's still more to be gained, it does have a lot to do with actually matching all of these planetary systems with things that are going on inside of your body. And as we talked about in many of the recordings, so in every tense, it's if there seems to be where the mind keeps wanting to highlight a specific issue, like let's say a specific name, if it keeps trying to attach to that name, it could be saying that is the part of the body that needs to be worked on most. Sometimes we're just not interpreting what we're really seeing the proper way. And then also understanding that all of this stuff does exist inside of us unless we make it external, unless we literally say, well, this is another specific being that's on the outside of me. And as with anything that's on the outside that's very powerful, it can become dangerous. And it can, the more the person believes in it, because it's being fueled by them, exercise some level of dominion over the person. Why? Because it's taking up a lot of time. Like if the person is like, listen to a song and then you can't get the song out of your head. Now the song has like some kind of dominion over you for that duration of time because it's all that one is focusing on. So this is where you want to realize also with all of this that none of these beings, and that's why it's all in all these traditions, none of these planetary systems and beings had anything on the sun. Right. And they say, in fact, the sun flung off all of these planets as being individual frequencies. They basically fell off the carousel when it got spinning too fast for them. OK. And then so the sun's precession, though, which is the precession of the soul, has to go through 360 degrees. That's why in the Kemetan tradition there was the Enneagram, or the 9 basically. And as one is going through these 360 degrees, you may find yourself in the 180 degree portion of yourself in the underworld, which is the 180 degree portion is when the sun moves through the dark areas of its existence in the pantheism. Pantheism being the spreading of the sun's different positions through degrees through the sky, and each degree being denoted to a specific entity that is in control of that hour. And what it's saying, though, is not let's go practice external magic to the specific hour of the day, but let us observe during that time within ourselves the movement and the waxing and waning of our own sphere, because you would have several clocks in a sense moving at the same time. Go ahead.
Okay, so you like say I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I do my meditation, and then say I have to be at the house by 7. I usually say if I bring happiness to work with me, it'll meet me halfway there. What I find out is that people jump out of the bed and just go to work, and they don't prepare themselves for the day. And then they come to work and they have this attitude about, oh, I want to leave early. Oh, I don't even want to be here. And it's like we regret putting ourselves in situations, but then when we're looking to get out of them, it's like there's so many different it's like it's a corridor. Like you swing yourself out of one door, you swing yourself back into another one. So,
well, I mean, I think we
I have to watch myself on a daily, like keep an observation of my attitude and personality and behavior and actions. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, we should stay focused here, because, if we start talking about other people, we could be here literally all day. I mean, the reality is that it is a good practice to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do the interfacing, because everything is dim at that point as far as the frequencies and all that kind of stuff. And even most people are in a certain frequency where they're not accessing this plane. They're just now coming into certain stages of their own sleep frequency, right? And so that's awesome. Yeah. And then also getting into see, there's so much to learn. Like, you still have to realize that there's a lot of people like Max Heindel. I've been reading his work. I've been reading a little bit of Samuel Word's work, with a grain of salt, because, all this stuff you do, the only thing you really need, okay, is your discernment. Because what happens is that it's easy when looking in the mirror to fall into the glass and like Narcissus. And if you start seeing something that you really admire, then you respect that and honor that. But you always have to remember that it's you, because then you can interpret the story from like a first person versus a third person point of view. Because if the story is really about you, but you're seeing it as somebody else, then it can't be interpreted the proper way. And just to nutshell it so we can get on to the next call, if to really understand the RAM and to understand the Jupiterian, see, Jupiter is a very large sphere. Look at it in the sky, it's a very huge planet. And in most cases, that's where all of the Abrahamic traditions are now being stored. So all the levels of consciousness that came from that specific era is stored within that sphere of Jupiter. And because it's just it's also a major part of time when there was a lot of regalia, there's a lot of high points in the Jupiterian sphere. So what a person can do sometimes, especially through the mantras, is get pulled magnetically back into those spheres, or back into the times where they wish things were that specific way. But existence tells us to keep moving on, to not choose because you haven't seen all the options yet. Not to mention, what you're really doing is collecting the experiences, not just collecting one experience. So in times it's important, especially now, to begin to invent. And invent is not something to be taken lightly, because we have a full manifestation property. That's why you can have a baby. So you can create an entirely different system that is for yourself. So this is the clue then. Notice how when I began this conversation, I told you there's only two different worlds. There's the dualistic planes and devacanic planes that are made out of physical material, and then there's the subjective plane, as the Kemetans talked about, as being basically the field of pure energy. It's something that all this other stuff is really made from. And so what you can do then, if you decide that you're not ready to go into totality, which the Kemetans decided, in the ones that were in that knew the knowledge, they didn't go in. What they did was they kept creating children or manifesting realities, attempting to make a perfect world based on their experiences, like any other architect. Because see, this is a house, okay? So who built this house? when they built this house, was there flaws? Or were we the flaw? It's like whoever built the house and then put us in here, that may have been the mistake. But what I'm telling you is that when you build something like you've built your body up until this point, if you had a chance to build a world, where would you get all of the ideas of what trees are, what people are, what chairs are, what all this stuff is, unless you got it from another experience? So that's where, we like, did you create the dirt? In one session, we say, yes, we did, because we are our ancestors. But in another, that's the paradox. We say, well, no, we didn't. Surely I don't know how to create dirt. So you see what I mean? So it's where you can really get the whiff of this is saying, look, once you get to a point of really being able to see the whole scope, which is a third eye, you need a third eye to do that, of what's going on, then at that point, you'll be able to manifest. And when you manifest, though, because you can manifest now, you will actually manifest something that you want. That way you won't keep reaping, and you won't keep basically birthing things that become a thorn in your side. And that's the metaphor of that's the metaphor of Adam and Eve and Cain. That the first level of manifestation that they created something that they didn't want. And it was because they didn't understand how to take care of what they created, which was a child. And that's why the serpent was present as a symbol of fertility, because it taught them how to actually create in the physical world. Because the serpent's whole thing was, and again, these are all metaphors, that it wanted to make a world. That's what Lucifer's thing was. I'm going to create a perfect world. And then the Supremes laughed at Lucifer because there's no such thing. You see, there's no such thing as a perfect duality. Like, think about what we're talking about. But some being said that, well, yeah, I can do that. And this, it becomes a massive storyline. But again, what we're talking about is that storyline entails things like death, which are also impossible. So do you see how one act that was impossible starts bringing forth impossible things? To the point where we're in a reality like, man, this is impossible. How do we hear? You see, so it's not what's being said is that it's not so much that it's not possible. It's that what state of madness will it put you into if you do make it possible? So this is a lot of times the things that we need to think about in these manifestations. Now, remember, some people have an idea of manifesting God in front of them, right? So then you get this conjured idea built over years and years and years of what people are telling you God is about, or the God that you've chose. And then if this thing happens to walk in the room, oh my goodness, your soul will jump out of your body. Because seeing something like what we can manifest in our minds in the physical reality, we're already seeing hints of how dangerous that can be with weapons and things, right? So imagine horn-faced deities running around the dimension, all at the same time HBO is on. It's too much for the reality to hold. It's like, what do they call that? Ripple effects way beyond the limit. So still take your scope, see exactly what's going on, see who is really the entity, the real grand being of the universe, which is yourself. Still don't cast it away from yourself, meaning that there's no reason to look at it as you're doing something wrong. Investigate it unless it becomes a habit, like a superstition, to the point where you feel like, well, if you're doing wrong by this particular being and all this kind of thing, and it starts hinging you into ritual, because that's circles. So remember, the last thing, it's a disc, a DVD, David or Dravid, Solomon's father, okay? That's who you're talking about with this particular system of knowledge. So how they read things is as a disc. It's like reading a book for them. It's not going in directly to the experience. It's reenacting the experience to see exactly what took place during that moment and then sealing it for oneself. That's why all the angels, they always seal the book. Seal the book. Why? Because once you learn something, you don't need to keep going back through that. We call that a circle. We're spirals. To keep going through it is pi. That's circles. We're phi. That's spirals. So this is a lot of because remember, there was a lot of sorcery, there was a lot of magic, there was a lot of the craft going on, a lot of illusion, a lot of smoke and mirrors. So that was the PlayStation back in the day. So still realize that the Rick Ross of Kemet would still be attempting to exercise dominance over the entire mental structure of that entire sphere, because that's all that was really going on with those kinds of manifestations into, basically the classic battle between light and dark on a physical plane with beings that have power. And that's when God becomes a weapon. You see? So no longer did we use then the elements for construction and for building ourselves. We use them to tear ourselves down. So these are the different parts. And you can always tell that when there's a division and the only thing that's brought forth is one part of the pan. They call that one piece of the pie. This is called peace, right? The word peace, which is the P, the papacy, the chiro, is just a part of the unity. It's not the whole thing. So the trick in the words by the poets, because they do nothing but play around with words, is that peace becomes a meaning that supposedly means that we're going to get what we want and everything's going to be great, even though the word itself does not denote that. So don't take a piece of the pantheism, take the whole thing, but in its own measure. Because to realize that the reason why you would go from one step to the next step to the next step, and trust me, that's the process, is because to eat the whole pie is to get a stomach ache. So just remember that part of it. Like, serious, if you're trying to take in all the knowledge and all the entities and all the deities and all the everything all at one time with just now waking up, though, not already knowing it, just now waking up, it could get to be a bit much. And we've all experienced this within our spiritual path to the point where basically spirituality starts to consume you. Every single thing you're doing. You can't even meld well with other people anymore. It's just like every time someone hears something come out of your mouth, it's all about spirituality. You're eating spirituality, drinking spirituality, sleeping spirituality, to a point where it takes all of the other parts of life that are also supposed to be about your spiritual progress. So to me, spirituality is the study of spirits, to tell you the truth. Lifestyle includes spirituality, includes taking care of the body, includes taking care of children, includes, all of the other different things, which we have to do. Because if we cut off any of those, then we do become defunct in our experiences. But there's a time and a place for everything.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm going to come in just because we only have a couple of minutes left, Sevan. Oh my God.
That's how it works.
I literally would like to have, I always call time my own personal 4-letter word. I'd like to jump outside of time for a good goddess knows how long this conversation would have to go on, but
oh yeah,
we still have to function in this realm right now.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to take this time
90 seconds.
Let the callers know really quickly how to find out more about you. And his show is Astral Quest. He has a couple of different websites, theresistance2010.com, realmdynamics.com, and about to unleash secretenergy.com.
Yep.
All of those are at the bottom of the info station. Did you want to tell them anything more briefly? And maybe I usually do a whole gratitude circle, but we have just a couple of us here. And anything else?
60 seconds.
Well, no, actually, I think we got quite a bit in. Today was a little bit wild. The message was in quite a few different places, but, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure other people were able to take certain things from it. And, I just want to let everyone know that the map is not the terrain itself, meaning that all I've done today is just describe a map. You've been transcribed that map over some digital device. And to actually have the experience itself will still not be akin to the words. I've just done the best that I can to begin to explain something that I am experiencing. It's not just Sister Betty and the rest of us with the Light Network and manifesting dreams of Zeta Recticuli. This is really about that the reality actually is encasing a great level of benefit for us to expand into other states of consciousness and beyond, other states of our own consciousness. I'll say that, and beyond. So thank you for listening, and it's been amazing. And also thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Sevan. I think I have like 6 seconds,
Yeah.
so I'm going to say thank you, all your listeners, anyone who appreciates. We do function on donations, and the website to donate is at the bottom of the information show. Also, I'll be loving to have Sevan back because I know you're releasing your new website very shortly by the end of the month. You said it was going into beta testing, and I can't wait. And thank you so much.